Well, I am showing 5 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and get the meeting started. Welcome and good evening, everybody. West Turlock Subbasin Groundwater Sustainability Association Board of Directors meeting May 13th. I call this meeting right at 5 due to the ongoing COVID-19 crisis and pursuant to Executive Order N 2920. This meeting is being held by conference call without a physical meeting location. This meeting was noticed in accordance with the Brown Act. In addition to a physical posting of the agenda at 333 Canal Drive, the meeting was noticed on turlockgroundwater.org and emailed to the Subbasin's ongoing interested parties list. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on Turlock Groundwater YouTube channel and also posted on turlockgroundwater.org. The board secretary is taking minutes. Materials are available online at turlockgroundwater.org. We encourage public participation throughout this board meeting. We'll receive public comment during the public comment period portion of the agenda. Also, feel free to use the raise a hand feature in Zoom located in the reactions menu. If you're on only by phone, by pressing *9, you can raise your hand. With that, Faye, will you call the roll?
Good evening, directors. Director Odom?
Present.
Director Maldonado?
Present.
Director Lopez? Director Larson? Director Espinoza?
Present.
Director Buck?
Present.
Director Alvarez?
Present.
Secretary Chiesa?
Here.
Vice Chair Jurisma?
Here.
And Chair Alamo?
Present.
We have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you, Faye. Are there any participants who wish to identify themselves at this time?
Yes, this is Nicole Larson from the city of Turlock.
Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Larson. I have you.
Okay, hearing no other participant list introductions, I'll move on to the approval of minutes of the regular meeting of February 4th, 2021, and also the special meeting, April the 8th, 2021.
Motion to approve, Chiesa.
Second, Jurisma.
Hearing properly moved first and second, is there any further comment or questions on the board minutes? If not, everybody please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The motion passes. Public comment period. Interested persons in the audience are welcome to introduce any topic within the agency's jurisdictions. No actions may be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda, except for the board may briefly respond to the comments, refer the matter to staff, or request it be placed on a future agenda. Are there any public comments?
Director Alamo, Chair Alamo, I'm just going to jump ahead to the piece that's following the public comment. There's a special section there that I'm going to read real quick, and then if anyone else has additional comment, they can get to that as well. Upon the completion of your last meeting on, and I'm making sure I could pull up the comment, on April 8th, we received word that a stakeholder was not able to make comment due to technical difficulties. And so I offered that stakeholder an opportunity to submit them post-mortem, I think might be the right word. And so I'm going to read them into the record right now, and then you could finish your public comment. So I'm going to do that right now. It says, this is from Mr. Rhett Calkins. He says, I would like to see that the West GSA establish a beginning fee to users of groundwater. This communicates to all parties that this is a serious endeavor. The state and DWR should respect a GSA that begins moving in a serious manner to manage their groundwater. The neighboring GSAs should also respect that we put money on what we plan and stand for. The users of groundwater will understand that this must be important. and perhaps we will have more interest and ultimately more participation. How long can we kick the can down the road on funding the GSA? We certainly do not want failure of the GSA/GSP subbasin and have the state take over. We need local control. The more local control, the better. Funding will be required. Let's start and let groundwater users know what is coming in not just management actions, but more specifically costs and thus fees. Costs will only grow. I'm reflecting on my long history with the East San Joaquin Water Quality Coalition. The coalition is a good model for where we will end up if we are successful. Note that the East GSA has just established their own fee. Thank you, Rhett Calkins. And I'll provide this transcript to the secretary, or this email to the secretary as well, so she has it in completeness. And that is all I have here for that item.
Are there any other public comments?
Oh, this is Rhett Calkins. I didn't know Herb was going to do that. I appreciate you reading that. You did a good job. I'm glad to get those comments as part of the public record. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhett. Any further public comment? Hearing now, we'll proceed on with our staff updates. Joint TAC update, Michael.
Good evening, Chair Alamo and agency directors. Both the Ad Hoc Technical Advisory Committee and the Joint Technical Advisory Committee have been meeting almost weekly since the last GSA meeting on April 8th. The ad hoc group has met 4 times and worked on a number of issues. I'll just list those real quickly. You'll get more details later on, but comments on the basin setting chapters made by both the East Turlock and West Turlock Technical Advisory Committees. We've worked on developing a sustainable groundwater yield for the subbasin. We worked on preventing lower groundwater levels from adversely impacting flows in the Merced River by looking at minimum groundwater levels. We're working on addressing the overdraft in the basin and also working on improving our groundwater monitoring network so we have more data to work with. We've been evaluating how to protect water quality by preventing further declines in groundwater levels, and also developing projects and management actions to facilitate the sustainable use of groundwater in the subbasin. And then the Joint Technical Advisory Committee has met 3 times since your last board meeting, on April 22nd and 29th and May 13th. As always, the meetings are very well attended. Sometimes we get more than 40 participants to our Zoom meetings. We've covered a number of issues, including developing the budget for next year, which is an action item for you tonight. Minimum thresholds for surface water interaction and chronic lowering of water levels. We worked on an approach for receiving, compiling, and developing responses to comments on the draft GSP sections as they are made available to the public for comment. We've looked at the groundwater and storage sustainability indicator. We've worked on phase 1 of the sustainable yield analysis and also potential projects and management actions. And I know Debbie Montalbano will go into more detail on these in her report. So with that, that's what your technical advisory staff have been working on since your last board meeting. Any questions for me?
Not hearing or seeing any hands raised. Go ahead and move on to interbasin coordination.
Okay, so no official interbasin coordination meetings have occurred since the last board meeting. However, we have been having conversations with members of the Merced Subbasin GSA, particularly Merced Irrigation District, as we work on issues related to the Merced River. I also attended an online meeting with staff from Merced County regarding potential changes to its groundwater ordinance, and we'll be following those as they work through the process and be reporting back to the board as things occur. So with that, that ends my reports, Chair Alamo.
Any questions on interbasin? Hearing none and seeing no hands raised, we'll go ahead with Debbie, GSP update.
Thank you. Can I share my screen, Herb? Oh, thank you.
You should be good now.
Thank you so much. Let's see, I think this is it. Does that come across okay?
Looks great.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to update you on the progress that the Technical Advisory Committee has been making on development of a draft GSP for your consideration. I want to talk about 3 items. Mr. Cook spoke briefly about some of it. I wanted to get into a little more detail. And as always, there is more detail on the Technical Advisory Committee's meetings and the discussion and process on the Turlock groundwater.org website. So Herb has been great with putting all of the videos up online so you can access them. And so if you have questions or want to investigate further, there's that resource as always. So the topics are the sustainable management criteria as it's continuing to be developed. In particular, I wanted to talk about stream flow interaction and chronic lowering of water levels. I'll give you a brief update on the process that we're going through to evaluate sustainable yield. And I'll have more information on that at a future meeting. We just got through a meeting today, and I'll give you some information on that. And then I wanted to talk about the public review process that we've updated and where we're going with that. So the development of a draft sustainable management criteria is ongoing and will continue to be ongoing as we move through this process. On April 22nd, we worked on the minimum thresholds for interconnected surface water and chronic lowering of water levels. But before I get into the specifics, I wanted to remind you of the process that we're going through to develop the sustainable management criteria and the GSP. So the ad hoc committee is working with the technical team to develop recommendations for the joint technical advisory committee. Then we bring those recommendations. So we go through a lot of back and forth at the ad hoc committee and come up with some recommendations that both the ad hoc group and the technical team kind of recommend moving forward. So then the joint TAC receive those recommendations, and then they make a recommendation on what to actually include into the draft GSP. Then that draft GSP will be coming to the GSAs and the public for the review and consideration. But the ultimate decision is really, with the GSAs. So I wanted you to know that there's a lot of work going on, but we're presenting and bringing information to you for you guys to consider as we move forward. The development of the GSP is also a very iterative process. And you'll see an example of this later. There's a number of decision points that we're going through. We're identifying initial sustainable management criteria, minimum thresholds, undesirable results, measurable objectives, interim milestones, projects and management actions that will evolve as we move forward. And each kind of decision informs the next. And we may have to revise earlier decisions based on new information that becomes available as we go through the process. So keep that in mind. Okay, so there have been 7 ad hoc committee meetings to kind of work through the interconnected surface water issue. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of back and forth and understanding the conditions in this situation. So the goal of developing the minimum threshold for any of the same sustainable management criteria is to avoid undesirable results. So the idea is you establish a minimum threshold that would ensure that you don't cause undesirable results. For the interconnected surface water sustainable management criteria, the undesirable results were drafted such that an undesirable result would occur if depletions of interconnected surface water cause significant and unreasonable adverse impacts on the beneficial uses of the surface water. So the declining groundwater levels that have occurred primarily on the eastern side of the Subbasin, where groundwater is the only or majority of the water that's available for use. The declining groundwater levels have increased river seepage over time, with more projected in the future as we developed and analyzed the baseline scenario that you've seen previously. And I'll have a slide to remind you of that in a minute. So that has caused the rivers to become, in some cases, or could cause the rivers to become disconnected from the groundwater, particularly along the Merced River. Arresting the groundwater level declines along the rivers could avoid those undesirable results. So this is a slide that you've seen before. It shows the three rivers that bound the Subbasin, the Tuolumne, the San Joaquin, and the Merced. To the left, you have a historical period that runs from 1991 to 2015. And then on the right, you have a baseline simulation, which is a continuation of existing conditions out 50 years to evaluate what the impacts might be over that timeline. And so here you see year 1 through year 50. And this is a continuation of historic hydrology. So this is a little complicated in interpreting it. This chart was initially designed to evaluate impacts to the groundwater system. And so a negative number is seepage to the river from the groundwater system. And then a positive number for each of these graphs includes seepage from or losses to the groundwater system. So because this graph was designed to evaluate impacts to groundwater, that's why water flowing into the groundwater is positive and out of the groundwater is negative. But for this purpose, we're looking at the impacts to the river. So you have to flip that around. And so a negative number is positive, and it's a good thing for the river because it's gaining. And a positive number is a negative number for the river because it's losing. So keep that in mind. So here in the historic, I'll use the Tuolumne River as an example. You see that the average over the historic period is negative 35,000 acre feet a year, which is, it's gaining over 35,000 acre feet on average per year. And then over the baseline scenario, it turns into a mainly losing river reach. So the difference is nearly 40,000 acre feet. It shift over that time frame. The San Joaquin River changes are a little less. It's about 10,000 acre feet, and then less. So it's a little less in the future scenario. And then for the Merced River, it's because the cone of depression is shifted closer to the Merced River, the impacts are more significant. And so currently it's a losing river to the tone of about 17,000 acre feet a year. Historically, in the future projection, it increased to about 60,000 acre feet a year. And in looking at the model information, it appears as though there are, and also talking with the Merced River managers, who is it's the Merced Irrigation District. They expressed concerns where they know that in certain times the pumping can significantly impact the amount of flow that's required along the river. And there are places further up where the Merced River is a canyon, and it appears as though perhaps it's disconnected already. But they want to make sure that it doesn't become more disconnected. And so it's kind of at this breaking point in a sense. If you look at the historic record, it appears that even though it's on average a losing reach, there's a significant amount of gaining reaches that help balance it out a little bit. in the future projection, you don't see it come back. And so that's a concern, and you'll hear more about that later. So minimum thresholds. The California regulations for SGMA requires that minimum thresholds be a rate or a volume of depletions that would adversely impact surface water beneficial uses and may lead to undesirable results. And so that's the requirement. However, they do allow for water levels to be used as what they call a proxy to help manage and avoid those undesirable results, rather than having a specific volume or rate. As long as you have a means to demonstrate that there's a correlation between the water level and the volume, and there's sufficient protection for the surface water resource. So the TAC is recommending that we consider a minimum threshold for chronic lowering of water levels as a proxy for the interconnected surface water to provide the protection to the surface water. There isn't another means of measuring it. We talked about gauges and other things that might be useful, and it just didn't seem reasonable given current facilities and information. So that is the recommendation, and I'll provide a little more in a minute. So let's talk a little bit about the minimum thresholds for chronic lowering of water levels. The Technical Advisory Committee has talked quite a bit about the adverse impacts that have been seen in domestic wells throughout a variety of places within the Subbasin, particularly on the western side. So the Technical Advisory Committee is suggesting that we set minimum thresholds at water levels at the low of 2015, which would be fall of 2015 water levels. The idea here is that this would address not only the water supply wells, because most of the wells that were impacted in the last drought went through and made improvements, lowered their pump or other things to accommodate those levels. So it would manage it at the existing expectations and help to reduce any impacts to domestic wells. It would also provide protection to the interconnected surface water and mitigate for future overdraft. So we wouldn't be continuing to drop the water levels in the cone and impact the rest of the basin as a result. And that's the idea. Recognizing also, though, that groundwater levels can continue to decline until projects and management actions are implemented. So groundwater levels could go below that minimum threshold and then come back up. And I'll show you kind of a diagram of what that looks like in a minute. And SGMA does allow for the achievement of minimum thresholds over time. So we're required to achieve it by the and achieve our measurable objectives by 2042. So we have 20 years to do that. So it kind of looks like this. The minimum thresholds, the orange line. You have water levels coming down in this blue line, and then we submit the GSP in 2022. It could continue to go down, particularly if it's a drought cycle. And then over time, we'll develop projects and management actions to have this glide path to what we consider the measurable objectives, which is where we're expected to be in 2042. So this shows you, in theory, kind of what that would look like as well with the different milestones. So the GSP gets adopted in 2022, and we have interim milestones. One might be below the minimum threshold for the first GSP that's due in 2027, but then we have other additional interim milestones, which is this IM number. And we'll be reporting on those in each of the GSPs to reach our measurable objective, which is the blue star that we're looking for in 2042. So this is ultimately where we are with the sustainable management recommendations at this point in time for these criteria. Chronic lowering of water levels. The undesirable result definition that we're working with right now states that significant and unreasonable groundwater level declines such that water levels or water supply wells are adversely impacted during multi-year droughts in a manner that cannot be readily managed or mitigated would be considered an undesirable result. And so the minimum thresholds would be expressed as the low groundwater elevations observed in fall of 2015. An undesirable result would be experienced by an exceedance of the minimum threshold at a designated percentage of representative monitoring locations in a designated number of consecutive semi-annual monitoring events. The reason for that is that it would ensure that one exceedance and one well, which could be an anomaly or something, wouldn't cause an undesirable result. You're looking for a larger impact, and so we'll, in the process of developing our monitoring network, and so with that, as we develop the monitoring network, we'll provide more details to those, but it provides a framework so that we would have a certain number of exceedances over a certain number of wells in several consecutive events that would trigger an undesirable result. And hopefully, if we start seeing exceedances, we're going to implement projects and management actions to avoid an undesirable result. And so that's the intent there. Then the next one is the interconnected surface water, and it's the bottom half is exactly the same because we're using the chronic lowering of water levels as a proxy. But here, undesirable results are characterized as significant and unreasonable adverse impacts to beneficial uses of surface water. And I think I talked about that earlier. So, so with that, I'll stop here and ask if there's any questions.
This is Director Oden. Do you know if the Merced Basin has any plan or any idea what they're going to do about the Merced River issue that is already known?
So, as I understand it, the Merced Subbasin will be, how do I say this? We'll be working on the interconnected surface water sustainable management criteria for their subbasin. There's actually something within SGMA that gives subbasins a little more time to address this issue. I think it's by 2025, but and that coincides with the critically overdrafted subbasin GSPs, that their second GSP. And so I believe that they're working their way through it. I think they kind of, and perhaps Lacey, who is engaged with the Merced Subbasin, might be able to share more because she has more detail on the specifics. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Lacey, but they are continuing to work on this issue, and the Merced Irrigation District, who is engaged in both subbasins on either side of the Merced River, is actively engaged in the development of ours, and is suggesting that something similar might be able to happen over there, but I don't know the specifics.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
See, somebody had something in the chat. Oh, thank you, Herb. if there's nothing else, I will move on. Okay, sustainable yield. So sustainable yield is something that we're required to evaluate and identify as a specific number in the groundwater sustainability plan. But it's an iterative process. It's going to take a little while to work through. We saw some preliminary information at the TAC today. And if people are interested, they're more than welcome to look that information up on the website. There'll be a video and there's a presentation attached to the calendar. And I wanted to kind of just give you a teaser more than anything else. We hadn't had the discussion at the TAC yet as I was preparing for this. And so my intent is to bring it to you in a future meeting at the GSA level. But I wanted to kind of give you an idea of where this thing is going. So sustainable yield is a requirement, but the sustainable yield will vary based on the amount of recharge within the subbasin. And so projects and management actions are going to influence the final sustainable yield number. But we have to approach the analysis in some way. And so again, it's this iterative process. Ultimately, the sustainable yield, as it says here on top, is the amount of groundwater pumping annually that can occur without undesirable results. And so we're trying to get to that number. And so the initial sustainable yield evaluation that was presented to the TAC today is simply a modeling exercise to inform future analyses. It's accomplished by strictly reducing pumping until sustainability is achieved. And that's not that we expect that to be the future, because we expect project management actions to occur to balance some of this, but it's a means of bracketing the amount of projects and management actions we need to include to offset groundwater pumping and ensure sustainability. And so it's a way of getting to the closer to where we need to be, rather than putting a bunch of projects management actions into the model and then running a scenario and seeing where you are, and then adding some more here or there until you get to, because that could be really expensive. And so by bracketing and understanding the volume that we might need to be able to address gives us a starting point to move through the process. And that's what this is intended to do. It also, incidentally, was a means of testing some of the initial sustainable management criteria that I just talked about. And what we found was that the low of the 2015 levels set initially, and like I said, just described, may not be protective enough on the Merced River to avoid undesirable results because of the phenomenon that I talked about earlier, that under the future scenario, they just weren't coming back. And so some of that initial analysis caused us to look at different water levels along the Merced River to address that. And it may result in changes in minimum thresholds. So just a teaser there. Again, more information online if you're interested, and I'll bring more to you soon. So I'll stop there if there's any questions. Okay. Lastly, the public review process. I've talked about this on a couple of different occasions, but this is something a little new. As you know, the Technical Advisory Committee review of the process or the initial chapters of the draft GSP have taken longer than we anticipate. But final recommendations, I think, are going to be available soon for the technical team. And so once the technical team has those, it shouldn't be long before we see that initial draft that should be able to be presented to the GSAs. So the plan right now is to try to find a time that would work for a joint GSA meeting and presentation. So we feel that would expedite the rollout of the drafts, ensure that everyone receives the same information, and would provide an opportunity for interaction between the two boards. The GSAs, after the presentation and discussion, could consider an action to release the draft to the public. And that would be an action that the GSAs would take. Then once the GSAs release it for public review and comment, then this would be the process that we would be using to take comments in and process them and respond to the comments. We want to make the process as convenient as possible, and different people are comfortable with different methodologies. So we have a few to offer them. We could take comments via email. They could attach documents and comments that way. We have a website portal. It's unable to accept files, but people can type or copy in comments into the portal. And I think Herb's going to share some information on all of that shortly. And then, of course, there's the U.S. Postal Service mail. We would then compile comments. The Technical Advisory Committee would recommend the GSA responses and or revisions, and we'd be working with the technical team to develop those. And the drafts, I think before we were thinking, we were trying to wrap up each section as we went. We're kind of thinking people may want to refer back and provide additional comments, and we've tried to figure out how to address that. And the best way at this point, we feel, is that it would be best to leave a draft available for review as the additional sections become released, and then finalize it all at once. But we do encourage stakeholders to provide comments as they go, so we kind of give an idea and gives us more time to work through it. Plus, providing sections early on will alleviate some of the burden on stakeholders in reviewing the comments, because sections tend to be kind of large. These documents are not an easy, simple, small review process. So we've been looking at how different critically overdrafted subbasins addressed the responses to comments. And we really liked the approach that Merced Subbasin took. So we're using it as a model. So they took, and the minor corrections and clarifications resulted in direct edits to the GSP. Substantive comments were categorized by topic, with a master response developed for each topic. And then comments on future considerations for the GSP implementation were categorized and compiled for consideration for future implementation. So, so rather than responding to each individual letter with, on each individual point, we would be kind of categorizing and grouping them together by topic and master response. And then, to make it easier for the individual commenter, the idea is that we would list the commenter and the corresponding master responses, so they know where to go to look for the responses to their individual comments. And that's all I had for you on the public review process. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Appreciate it, Debbie. Thank you very much for that update.
Thank you.
We're going to move right on to Michael Clipper, and he's going to do the budget update and the adoption of the 2021-22 budget at the same time here. Michael.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. The current balance for the West Turlock GSA account for ending April 30th was $165,113.10. Then, as you can see, if you scroll down, you can kind of see there was no activity for April. Sometimes the checks are done kind of in batches for that. And then here's all the activity year to date so far. Any questions on the West Turlock account? Okay, moving on to the Basin account. We had on April 30th, we had $902,145.74. And then if you scroll down a little bit, you can kind of see all the activity for the different, two different projects going on with Todd Groundwater. So one is for one grant and one is for the other grant. Any questions on our current financials?
I'm not seeing any, Michael. Let's proceed right on with the 21-22 budget adoption.
Okay. Moving on to the West Turlock Subbasin budget. This is just kind of the memo. Next page, we have our budget. $104,000 is the annual dues that we invoice all member agencies. And then we have the various legal and other auditors, incidental fees and everything. Then this has a breakdown of all the members. And then the next slide will show everyone's contribution towards basin-wide projects. So we have the annual report, budget adjustment, monitoring river wells, monitoring wells within the basin, and then our dues. So this would be what each individual member would pay, and that would be invoiced in July of 2021 for that first column. And then we have some expenses that continue to the right there that would be invoiced in July of 2022. So some of these projects are over 2 years. And then moving on to the next one, you can see this is the expected revenue and expenses for the Turlock Basin account. And, you know, these are all kind of estimate carryovers and estimates of when we would spend money and receive money for projects. So if you scroll back up to the top and finish with the memo. So I'm looking for approving a budget in the amount of $489,739.82 for the West Turlock GSA. Any questions?
We got a couple chats.
Nope.
Oh, no, nothing on this. Oh, that's Herb there. Okay. Any other questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion. I know Rodrigo's got to go here pretty quick, so let's try to get this resolution in.
So moved.
Is there a second?
There's a second.
It's been properly moved and seconded, Faye. I'm not seeing any further questions or comments on the 21-22 budget. So go ahead and proceed with the vote.
Okay, directors. Director Odom?
Yes.
Director Maldonado?
Yes.
Director Larson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Drisma?
Yes.
Director Espinoza?
Yes.
Secretary Chiesa?
Yes.
Director Buck?
Yes.
Director Alvarez?
Yes.
And Chair Alamo?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Faye. Appreciate that. With that, I'm going to jump back to Herbie. Had a brief announcement he needed.
Yes, thank you, Chair Alamo. Just two quick items real quick. The first is that you authorized staff to submit a facilitation support services application to the Department of Water Resources for facilitation services. We submitted that on April 28th, and we spoke with the consulting firm that is being used by the department on May 4th to kind of clarify some of our asks for these various tasks, one of which is facilitation for future meetings. Another one is a GSP adoption toolkit. And the third task that we've asked for is some recorded presentations. And so we're continuing to work on that process, and we're awaiting final word from the Department of Water Resources, but we're hopeful that we'll be able to receive funding for those items that is funding that is not needed to be paid back to the Department of Water Resources. So debt-free money is very nice for future outreach. And then, excuse me, I'm just gonna share my screen real quick to show you, as Debbie mentioned, this is the turlockgroundwater.org website. And we have a special section here on the site now that's called the GSP, in anticipation of some release sometime in the coming weeks, or perhaps the coming month of the first three sections of the GSP for public comment and stakeholder consideration. And so I'm just going to quickly click through and show you what's on that page. The page basically outlines, as you heard from Ms. Montalbano, the three ways that we would be able to receive comments. United States Postal Service mail, we have an address there. And then we have email, and we have a form that that launches to submit comments, where people could attach their comment letters or directly put into the body of the email what their comment is on the GSP section. And then we have a form that's available through our website where people can cut and copy comments, as I'm showing you here, cut and copy comments into the form, list their organization, list their message, or they could type it in directly if it's a brief comment on a specific section. As was mentioned earlier, we don't have the capacity through our website to accept attachments for this form, but if people wish to submit a comment letter or an attached Microsoft Word document, they would be able to just send an email through the email feature we have here. So three ways that we'll be taking GSP comments. And I'll just go back to the previous tab. We have listed on here, of course, it's no good if we have a GSP website that doesn't have access to the GSP sections. So we have up to the top here, we have a link that jumps you right to the bottom of the page where we have the GSP sections. And you notice here we have it pieced into two sections, one in which says the sections that are available for comment, and then sections that are not yet available for comment because they haven't been drafted yet. So you notice the three sections, section 1, 2, and 4, that we have of that we're anticipating being released shortly, are listed as coming soon, and that is where people will be able to download those sections and provide comment through the three ways that are mentioned on the site. And then future sections are listed here on the right, and that is a general overview of our GSP sections of the website that we'll continue to update throughout the process. And so that is all I have for the public outreach update, unless there are any questions. Is Joe on mute by chance?
I am on mute. Thank you, Herb.
Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you for that update. All I see on the agenda left is comments from the board. Are there any comments from the board? Not hearing none. Do check your chat. I see that Debbie responded to a question. So check your chat for more information. But other than that, I will declare this meeting adjourned, and our next planned meeting will be August the 12th, 2021. Thank you, everyone.